Will 2024 be Kyle Whittingham's final as head coach of the Utah Utes? That's what we'll be discussing on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are available on YouTube or wherever you may get your podcast. If this is your first time listening to this show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments, and you can rate and review on Apple Podcasts as well. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by Gametime. You can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On College. That's all caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. My name is JT Wistricll, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's show by Michelle Bodkin of KSL Sports. And Michelle, we had a crazy weekend. We had Big 12 Media Days last week. You had the bash with KSL Sports too. So just a lot of things going on in the world of Utah football. It's kind of the end of the offseason, even though we have a quiet couple weeks till fall camp does officially get underway. But the biggest takeaway I had from last week was Kyle Whittingham saying out loud at Big 12 Media Day, and it was funny too, because he wasn't asked about his future. When he was asked about his future earlier in the media session, he said, like, I'm taking it day by day, all the things like that, which day by day was an interesting word choice for that in general. But at the end, when a reporter asked him about Vegas, that's where he's like, when we play Miami in 2027, I'm probably not going to be here. And it wasn't that he said he would be here in 2027. It was the fact that he openly admitted in that interview he was on Jim Rome's show. He talked about, like saying taking it day by day. He dove into that topic that he brought up more, and just his answer to those questions. Said he wasn't going to coach past 65. He's going to be 65 in November. Loves this group of players that he's had a ton of success with. Most of them are leaving after this year, part of that 2021 team. He's helped navigate the transition to the Big 12. In my opinion, just reading the writing that's on the walls, I do believe this will be Kyle Whittingham's last as the head coach of the Utah football program.
I think there's some indicators there that's probably a good guess. I mean, to be honest, Kyle's a crafty dude, and he's someone that he's the only one that knows what he's doing. I mean, really, when it comes right down to it. So it also wouldn't surprise me if, he keeps it going for a little while longer, or possibly even runs out the contract. Obviously, he said probably won't be here in 2027. That makes a lot of sense, since that is when his contract is officially up. I don't know that he's going to really re-up on this contract. So really, from anywhere from like now, meaning end of this season, to 2027, I think, I think it's going to happen in that period. When exactly it happens, I think only Kyle really knows. I think there's some interesting points to be made as to why this particular season could be the last season. Obviously, they made the big to-do about Morgan Scalley is going to be the next in line, which isn't exactly a surprise. It's kind of the worst kept secret ever. Like, only outsiders are kind of, I think, surprised by this. The rest of us are like, oh, good, they made it official again. But like, we already knew this was going to be a thing. And I just think if the team succeeds the way that everybody thinks they will, I mean, that's a good point to leave on, right? Like, and he's talked about, I don't want to overstay my welcome. That's kind of the key. You don't want to stay so long that things start taking a nosedive. Like, you want to leave when you're on top. And so, if this team does go in and win a Big 12 championship, if they do go in and make a run at the playoffs, either a playoff game, win a playoff game, or, I mean, if you want to dream super, super big, if they're competing for the national title, much more as a coach could you want? The guy's already got 2 undefeated seasons to his name. One as a DC, obviously one as a head coach, and then 2 Rose Bowls and 2 Pac-12 championships, plus a couple of Mountain West championships as well. So the guy's been there, done that, and pretty much checked every possible box you could want to as a head college football coach. And he's done it at a small school that had to build itself up to this, no less. So It might be a good time to tap out. He may decide that he still likes the challenge and it's exciting. And what can I do with this next group and Isaac Wilson and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be interesting to watch. I would say if you're going to put money on it, the end of this season is probably a good bet. But Kyle's got the ultimate. The only one that I think has a better poker face is probably Andy Ludwig, to be honest. He's hard to read. He may still want to keep going. He may want to go until the contract actually runs out. But it feels like maybe this year is as close as we've ever been to him possibly wanting to tap out.
Yeah, it'd be interesting if he made these comments and let's say in some like world, Cam Rising had an extra eligibility and hadn't been in college already for 7 years, right? Like that's the part where if you have this great player that you've already been to these heights with, and multiple great players, right? Brant Kuithe, you've added Dorian Singer, but Junior Tafuna, everything he's done, Karene Reed, like there's a lot of just players from even the 2021 team that are still here. If those guys somehow had extra eligibility, like let's say they went back to back in 22, 23, then I think it'd be different too, because it's like, man, do I really want to stop this good thing from going? That's where it could be different. But you also make a really good point about this. Kyle Whittingham, as any college football coaches, is obviously ultra competitive, and they look for the tiniest things as motivators. If he got to the time where it's like, oh, it's retirement time, and he was thinking about it, he's like, wait, do I really want to retire? He wouldn't have to look very far to find motivation, because this year, look, Utah's picked the top of the Big 12, making the college football playoff. If they didn't, would be a little bit of a disappointment in a lot of ways. But next year, to your point, Michelle, like there's no one who's going to be picking Utah more than likely, unless they bring in a crazy amount of transfers. Because right now, if one of the guys who's on the roster wins the job, like I have faith that Isaac Wilson can be good. Mm-hmm. That's all I can go on because I haven't seen him or a lot of these things and the turnover that would exist there too. So there would be a lot of motivating factors for Kyle Whittingham to come back. But as you said too, with them also naming Morgan kind of the head coach in waiting officially, as you properly noted, because it's been that way for a while. There really are pros and cons to both sides about why this could be his final year or he could potentially come back.
Well, and I think the other thing to keep in mind as well, his contract also does state that when he does retire, he's staying on as like an analyst or an advisor. So he's still going to have his hands in it. But he's just not going to be as in charge of it. And to be perfectly honest, this is just my feeling and conspiracy theory in a way. I honestly think Morgan's been running the show a lot more than most of us realize, with Whit just kind of doing a like thumbs up or thumbs down sort of thing, and taking over where needed. But I kind of suspect a lot of people have been getting experience, and not just Morgan, but I think a lot of other people that, more responsibility will fall on when and if Kyle does decide to kind of step away. I think he's just been better about delegating responsibilities. And part of it's because he has a really good staff in place. Part of it's because, we're depending on these people to keep this thing going. And part of it is I think he just feels like he doesn't have to be the one that handles everything. So I think there's a multitude of things. Again, this is just my personal feeling. This isn't, nobody's told me anything. This isn't, don't take it to the bank, but like, I kind of suspect there are people behind the scenes that are running the show a lot more than I think fans and even a lot of us media people probably realize.
Great point, because recruiting has changed so much from when just in the course over Kyle Whittingham's career. I mean, my gosh, he's been a part of this Utah team through 4 conference changes. So that's obviously a lot of change over time. That's where you're going to probably rely on some of your younger assistants to deal with a lot of those changes and adapt to that, who, when you are the head honcho as Kyle Whittingham is, right? Like he can sit there and be like, his name, the Kyle Whittingham name itself, just carries so much power and cachet that I think that's where you do see a lot of the recruits a lot of these assistants stepping in and doing more in that regard. So I think that's a very strong possibility that Utah has been operating that way, because it just felt like for so long Morgan is the guy, and we know about his recruiting efforts in Texas and other states as well too. So he was always the right choice, and feels like he'll be well prepared whenever he does get the opportunity, whether that's in 2025 or beyond. But one thing we do not have to wait till 2025 to talk about is EA Sports College Football is finally here. It's back. It's been a long time waiting and coming. And yes, while we all get excited to play the game, there is something I have to pick a little bit of a grind my gears with, I'll say. They released the top 100 player ratings ahead of the release, which we will all get to play later today. It's not a single Utah football player in the top 100. I have some questions about that we will be discussing in one moment. But first, I want to talk to you all about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes, our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to take your car and make it the MVP, bringing home huge wins in the process. You can keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, EA Sports is officially back with their college football video game. We've all been waiting a long time to be able to play it. And the team ratings we've talked about on this show, Utah, a top 10 team overall, barely squeezing in right at number 10. How they check in offensively? Also really good. 11th best offense. Love to see that. Defensively, top 10 defense. They're ranked 10th. So that's a lot of positive things. We know about all the good players on this roster. So top 100, Utah's got to get a couple guys in there. Well, wasn't exactly how it ended up playing out. Utah does not have a single player ranked inside the top 100. There's several snubs we can dive into with Cam Rising's just clutch ability. I mean, just so many things to go to. The clutch ability, the accuracy, just there's more than enough to me that Cam is shown to be a top 100 player. But the biggest snub on this list to me by far is Brant Kuithe. Yeah. I think he's got a chance to be the best tight end in college football. If they came to me and said, well, we're worried about the injury, I could get that a little bit, but all we saw him healthy in the spring. All we've heard about is that he's healthy. And the last time he was on the field, he was absolutely a top 100 player in college football. I still go back to that game he had against Florida. He was unreal what he was doing to those SEC defensive backs.
He caught a ball with his foot.
Exactly.
He caught a ball with his foot.
Yeah. I can't believe he's not. I can't believe he, of everyone, is not on this list in the top 100.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most surprising one. And as you mentioned, there's others that you could point to. Dorian Singer's a little bit surprising. I get that, like, you know, you don't necessarily know a whole lot about him anymore because he was on the bench at a very, very deep USC team. I'm trying, like, Carson Ryan's probably someone you could look at. I'm trying to think on the defensive side, you know, a junior.
I think the junior Tufuna is one.
Lander Barton. Yes.
Lander at the end of the season is going to be on there, right?
What I think, honestly, kind of heard all these guys and you kind of mentioned it. I think there's some, well, they were all injured. Like, yeah, they're all in, or they were sitting on the bench somewhere. So what's up with that? But I do agree. I think it's a little bit odd. I will be very honest. Like, I will never play this game. I've never played this game. Like, I'm not a video game person at all. I was the great girlfriend in college that would sit and watch my boyfriend play this for hours and just be very patient about it. But I none of this really means a whole lot to me. I just don't understand it. But like, it does feel weird that you have the defense rated as top notch. You have the offense rated as top notch. The overall team is rated as top notch. And yet you don't have a single player that's cracking the top 100 in college football. And we kind of talked about this off air. It feels very much to me like you saw the Big 12 media poll come out, right? And you have Kansas State voted number 2 and not a single player on the all conference. Like, that just does not compute to me. And even kind of looking at Utah, they only had 3 players on the all conference team. What? And they're voted number 1. I don't know about that, Bob, but it's just, I think it's just, I think there's a lot of mystery surrounding these players. And I think that's kind of why, we know from the past that a lot of them are very good and very productive, but will they look like that in 2024? And I think there's plenty of returning talent that didn't sit out a year or two because of injury, that the gamers felt a little more confident in making the top guys, but it somehow, and again, someone that actually plays video games is going to understand the logic better, but somehow it balances out with Utah just having a top overall rated defense, a top overall rated offense, and a top overall rated team.
It's a strange situation, as you mentioned. And there are guys, I think, in the past, like, I don't want to destroy them. Like, to me, not having Lander on this list is understandable because of, as you said, the injury, and just his numbers because of that injury didn't get to project as well. Mm-hmm. But he absolutely strikes me as a guy by the end of the season is going to be one of the 100 best players.
Yeah, everybody's going to be like, why isn't he one of the 100 best players?
Exactly. Cole Bishop, Sione Vaki were guys in the past, right? Weren't necessarily in the season going into, but I think by the end you looked at it and like, those are some Jonah Ellis last year, right?
Yeah.
There are so many guys you can look to that surprise us. I think Brant should be on this list right now. I think Cam should be. Junior Tafuna, to me, is one of the 100 best players in college football. He does not play a position that is very popular because it doesn't put up eye-popping numbers. But his ability it's not flashy, but his ability to take on double teams and allow Corene Reed and Lander Barton to do what they do is, to me, what should have garnered him a spot in the top 100. And Lander's a guy I'd love to see. Zamaya being up in the top 100 would be another guy that I think would be deserving of so. Outside of that, I think you could look at another guy like after this season. I think I could totally see Teo Johnson being on here. There is no reason going into the season that Teo Johnson should be on this list, but he strikes me as another guy that is just going to have a great year.
Where did that guy come from?
Exactly.
Wow, he's so good.
It always seems.
How did we miss this one?
It's
like he tried out a few positions, and this is really his first shot at it.
And that's what always seems to happen.
It's no big deal.
Yeah.
It's just the Utah way.
That's a great way to put it, because there's always guys, whether it is changing position or just biding their time for a few years and then getting that opportunity, who pop up on this list. We talked about Teo. We touched on a couple of these guys, Michelle. Is there any other name on this roster that you're like, but nowhere would he be on it right now? But by the end of the season, similar to a Dalton Kincaid from a few seasons ago, Jonah Ellis last year, that you think will pop up and be one of the top 100 players in college football this coming year?
Landon King.
I
think Landon King is someone that would be capable of doing something like that. He definitely showed some flashes last year. And I mean, not enough to warrant it now, but next year. Again, Carson Ryan, I think, is another one. Maybe not right now, but at the end of the season, possibly. Again, we don't know a whole lot about Damian Alford, but I mean, what he did at Syracuse was impressive, and that was with not a great quarterback, no less. And he was still putting up those numbers. So you assume, logically speaking, you do have a great quarterback, or at the very least, a good quarterback. I think he's great, but it's what can he do with that? I'm trying to defense at Keenan Johnson. I mean, the coaches have loved Keenan Johnson. I get smaller school, Georgia Tech, and you just don't know what he's going to do in this defense. But the end of the season, if he's everything that the coaches are saying he is, and they're usually not wrong, I think he's someone that you could really look to and consider. So I think there's several guys on this team, to be honest, that are kind of just relatively unknown at the moment, and that's fine. I don't think there's anything terribly, terribly offensive about that. Like I said, I think the kind of egregious ones are probably Cam, Brant, and we'll say Lander, maybe. And maybe Junior. I think you could throw Junior in there. So there's 4 guys that feels like really like we're not doing that for them. But some of these other ones, I think there's potential there, but you got to go out and prove it. And at the moment, they're not proven, and that's not a slam or a knock at them. It's just
a fact.
You've had minimal opportunities, or you were playing somewhere else, and we just don't know how you fit into this puzzle. We think it'll be good, but until we see it on the field, like, can you really warrant putting them in the top 100 of like a video game? I don't know. So
I absolutely agree. I think you're dead on. The only one I will say that we just haven't mentioned as a potential guy that by the time the season concludes, we look back and say that was one of the 100 best players in college football is the guy who'll be looking to replace Joan Ellis. Connor O'Toole was supposed to be his team's best pass rusher a year ago. I think O'Toole's a guy who could have a monster season, and he is also fits under the umbrella of a guy who changed positions and then could have a big year with his Utah football program. Would love to see Logan Fano get on here as well. I think he's a guy with tremendous speed and traits, but either way, that's what makes this. That's why Utah's in the top 10. And I think if we asked the developers at EA, they would even say there's a lot of good players in college football. It's tough for some of these guys just missing the cut. And I think some of these, not these deep weeds guys we're talking about, but like the first few, that's probably what they'd say. And they even know by the end of the year, there's always tons of surprises because these guys have spent all offseason grinding, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. But the offseason is almost over, Michelle. Hence why we just had Big 12 Media Day, had lots of opportunities to talk with the players and the coaches. You were present at Big 12 Media Day. What were some of your big takeaways from that event?
I think everybody's just ready to go and prove themselves. Last year was very frustrating for a lot of people, and obviously so. You have to sit on the sideline because you're injured, and then you watch, 30 to 40 of your closest buddies also join you on the sideline because they're injured. It's just, it's a frustrating thing for the coaches. It's a frustrating thing for the players. That wasn't the season that they planned on. In theory, that team was going to be very good and would have probably been competing more so at the top of. And I say that because, again, mathematically, they were still in it in November, despite playing fourth string, fifth string guys, and it was a very, very deep Pac-12 conference. It was a tough conference. And outside of the Oregon and Arizona games, they kept most of those games fairly respectable, whether they won them or lost them. There were those two blowouts, and I think it's understandable, why that happened. Again, it's not that you have to like it as a fan or you have to like it as the players or the coaches, but at some point, you kind of have to throw your hands up and say, well, what else can we possibly do? We've done the best we can. And I think they absolutely did show that. Despite some frustrating moments still. But I think to me, that's the biggest thing. They just want to go out and prove like, hey, we're all healthy. We're all okay. We hyped up this team last year. A good chunk of it's returning this year. Like, we were going to be legit, and we're going to go show it in this new conference. I think to me, that was the biggest takeaway, outside of, Witt kind of sort of giving a little bit of a time frame as to when he might be done, at least as far as Utah is concerned. I think those were probably the biggest talking points, and then obviously you have Cam being Cam in Allegiant Stadium, no less. Just
true.
Just speaking his mind. Some of those good one-liners, two-liners, speaking about the BYU game. But, I think it was all in good fun, and we'll see how this all kind of rolls out, works out. But I think there's reason for the confidence. I think there's reason for the swagger from this team. Again, I know a lot of Big 12 old timers don't love that. And I get it. Like, I get that you don't want the cocky new person coming in and taking over your conference. But there's just reasons why there's so much buzz around this team. And it's until they prove otherwise, it's fully warranted.
It's absolutely fully warranted. We've talked about a lot on this show why Utah is the favorite, and I like that Kyle Whittingham recognized that too. Like, he's appreciative of the Big 12 for naming them the preseason conference favorites. Yeah. And you're right, Michelle. We're coming up very soon to when we actually get to find out if this Utah team can live up to the lofty expectations that have deservedly been placed on their shoulders. And if people want to get primed and prepped for the season, where should they head over to?
Yeah, so you can follow me at Bodkin KSL Sports. That is on X, on Instagram, and on Threads. And then, yeah, you can just obviously follow my work also on KSL Sports. So
awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle. Appreciate you.
no problem. Thanks for having me, as always.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. Still got some recruiting news, college football rankings, all kinds of things are coming out. It's a loaded week on Locked On Utes. We hope you'll continue to stick with us. Have a great Monday, everyone.